Silver Smart Living Systems. How Smart Homes Rewire the Cerebellar Loop After 55. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across the living room floor. She stood in the doorway, remote in hand, staring at the thermostat like it was a puzzle she'd forgotten how to solve. Same house, same walls, but somehow, everything felt just slightly out of reach. It wasn't that she couldn't figure it out. She'd raised 3 children, managed a career, navigated decades of change with grace. But lately, the small things, adjusting the temperature, remembering to turn off the lights, hearing the doorbell seemed to require just a little more effort than they used to. She wasn't chasing youth, just ease, just the quiet confidence of moving through her own space without second-guessing every step. But here's what she didn't know yet. What none of us really talk about when we discuss getting older and staying independent. The struggle wasn't about memory or capability. It was about something deeper. Something happening in the part of the brain that governs automatic movement, coordination, and the unconscious rhythm of daily life. Her cerebellar loop, the neural pathway responsible for turning conscious effort into effortless habit, was quietly recalibrating. And that recalibration changes everything about how we experience home. What happened next would shift not just her comfort, but her entire relationship with the space she'd lived in for 30 years. Researchers at MIT's Age Lab discovered something fascinating about how we interact with our homes after 55. It's not that we lose the ability to adapt. It's that the brain begins prioritizing efficiency over novelty. The cerebellum, which once helped us master new skills quickly, now favors preserving energy for what matters most. In practical terms, learning a new interface, remembering multiple steps, or coordinating complex sequences becomes cognitively expensive, not impossible, just exhausting in a way it never used to be. She noticed it most in the evenings. By the time dinner was done and the day's tasks were behind her, the idea of programming the coffee maker for morning or adjusting the smart lock settings felt like climbing a small mountain. So she stopped trying. And slowly, the technology meant to help her started feeling like one more thing she was failing at. Maybe comfort had made her complacent, or maybe she was just tired of feeling like a guest in her own life. But what if the problem wasn't her at all? What if the real issue was that most smart home systems were designed by people in their 20s and 30s, people whose cerebellar loops still thrived on complexity and novelty, people who didn't yet understand what it felt like when the brain starts choosing wisdom over speed? There's a term for this in neuroscience: cognitive load. It measures how much mental effort a task requires. And here's the insight that changes everything. After 55, our tolerance for high cognitive load doesn't disappear. It just becomes more selective. We can still learn, still adapt, still master new systems. But only if those systems align with how our brains naturally want to work now. She almost gave up on the whole idea of a smart home. Then one afternoon, her daughter mentioned something she'd read about voice-controlled systems designed specifically for aging adults. Not dumbed down, not patronizing, just elegantly simple. What would you have done in that moment? She ordered one small device, a voice-activated light controller. Nothing fancy, just speak, and the lights respond. No app, no menu, no multiple steps to remember. The first time she used it, something unexpected happened. She didn't feel like she was using technology. She felt like she was simply living. The cognitive gap between intention and action had collapsed. Think it, say it, done. And in that tiny moment of ease, something in her brain began to shift. Here's what the neuroscience reveals, and it's both beautiful and practical. The cerebellar loop doesn't weaken with age. It refines. It becomes extraordinarily good at recognizing patterns and executing familiar routines. What it struggles with is learning new multi-step procedures that don't map onto existing neural pathways. But voice control, that maps perfectly. We've been speaking since childhood. The neural pathway from thought to speech is one of the oldest, most efficient routes in the human brain. When smart home technology leverages voice instead of visual interfaces and menu navigation, it bypasses the cognitive load entirely. She started small. Lights first, then the thermostat, then the door locks. Each addition felt less like learning a new system and more like extending her natural capabilities. The house began responding to her rhythm instead of demanding she adapt to its logic. He smiled when she told him about it. Her husband had been skeptical at first, worried it was just another gadget that would sit unused in a drawer. But watching her move through the house with that old confidence restored, that subtle shift from hesitation to certainty, he understood. Independence didn't mean doing everything alone. It meant doing everything with ease. Stanford researchers found something fascinating in a longitudinal study tracking adults over 60. They discovered that independence, not physical activity alone, predicts long-term vitality and cognitive health. And independence, they found, is less about what you can do and more about how effortlessly you can do it. When daily tasks require constant conscious effort, the brain stays in a state of low-grade stress. The cerebellar loop never gets to rest. Over time, this sustained cognitive load contributes to fatigue, frustration, and eventually, withdrawal from activities that once brought joy. But when those same tasks become automatic again, when the home responds intuitively to natural cues, the brain relaxes into its preferred operating mode. Energy gets redirected toward connection, creativity, and presence. She noticed it first in the mornings. No more fumbling for light switches in the pre-dawn darkness. No more mental checklist of what needed adjusting before the day began. Just a simple voice command, and the house woke up with her. Then came the real shift. She started cooking again. Not elaborate meals, just the kind of simple, satisfying food she used to make without thinking. The kitchen felt accessible again because she wasn't splitting her attention between cooking and managing the environment around her. Part of her had wondered if change was even worth it anymore. If maybe this was just what getting older meant, a slow accumulation of small inconveniences you learned to live with. But this felt different. This felt like reclaiming territory she'd thought was lost. Sometimes, independence is less about strength and more about surrender. Surrendering the idea that we need to master every new system the way we did at 30. Surrendering the belief that struggling means we're still capable. Surrendering control to technology that finally understands how to support us instead of challenge us. There's a particular type of smart home system gaining recognition in gerontology circles. It's called adaptive automation. Unlike traditional smart homes that require programming and maintenance, adaptive systems learn from behavior patterns. They notice when you typically adjust the temperature, when you usually turn on lights, when you prefer certain rooms warmer or cooler. Over time, the house begins anticipating needs before you voice them, not in an invasive way, in the way a longtime partner knows your rhythms, the way home should feel. She mentioned it to a friend over coffee. The friend had been struggling with similar frustrations, technology that promised ease but delivered complexity. They talked about it for an hour, sharing stories of devices that sat unused, systems too complicated to justify the benefit. But when she described the shift from managing technology to simply living while technology managed the details, her friend's expression changed. That look of recognition, of possibility, what surprised her most wasn't just how the voice-controlled system made life easier. It was how it gave her back a sense of control. Not the control of mastering every feature and option, the control of knowing her space responded to her, that she could move through her days without that constant low-level negotiation with her environment. She didn't expect such a clear shift in daily comfort. She tested it quietly, and over time, she noticed the difference wasn't small. It was the difference between living in her house and living in her home. This isn't a promotion, just sharing something that truly worked, something that aligned with how her brain wanted to work now, rather than demanding she adapt to how technology companies thought it should work. If you're feeling that same friction, that sense of being slightly out of sync with your own space, it might be worth exploring voice-activated systems designed with cognitive ease in mind. The link is below if you'd like to see what I mean. But here's the deeper insight, the one that extends beyond any single device. The conversation around aging and technology has been framed wrong from the start. We keep talking about making technology accessible to older adults as if the challenge is on their end. The real challenge is making technology worthy of mature brains. Brains that have spent decades building efficient neural pathways. Brains that know the difference between complexity and sophistication. Brains that deserve systems designed around wisdom, not novelty. The cerebellar loop after 55 isn't weaker. It's more discerning. It knows what deserves its energy and what doesn't, and a home that requires constant conscious management. That doesn't make the list. She stood in the doorway again months later, but this time without the remote. The blinds adjusted automatically to the afternoon sun. The temperature had already shifted to her preferred setting. The soft background music she favored while reading had faded in so gradually she barely noticed the transition. Same house, same walls. But everything felt different now. Not because the space had changed, because she had stopped fighting it. Somewhere between new routines and old habits, she found ease again. Not the kind she once had, when youth made everything feel effortless, but the kind that fits who she is now. The kind earned through years of knowing exactly what matters, and what matters isn't mastering technology. It's living so fully that technology disappears into the background where it belongs. When she poured her coffee the next morning, the kitchen lights had already brightened to match the dawn. The thermostat had adjusted for the cooler morning. The house had woken with her, quietly and without fanfare. She smiled, realizing the shift wasn't in the devices themselves. It was in reclaiming the mental space she'd been giving away, one complicated interface at a time. The morning light hit differently now, not because the room had changed, but because she had stopped spending her energy managing it. She had returned to simply inhabiting her life, and in that return, she found something she hadn't expected. Not ease in spite of aging, but ease because of the wisdom that comes with it. The wisdom to recognize when technology serves you and when you're serving it. The wisdom to choose systems that align with how your brain works now, not how it worked 30 years ago. This is what smart living actually means after 55. Not homes filled with complicated gadgets, but spaces that respond to the sophisticated, efficient, beautifully refined neural pathways we've spent decades building. The cerebellar loop doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be honored. The content is for educational and informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical, financial, or professional advice, and should not be used as a substitute for guidance from qualified professionals. All decisions made based on this content are the sole responsibility of the individual. What part of this story spoke to you most? Have you felt that tension between wanting ease and feeling overwhelmed by the systems designed to provide it? Tell us which city or country you're watching from. See you in the next video.